The sermon title today, Days Like This. And the title is also the title of a number of Van Morrison, that Irish musician and singer that I was listening to one day during the week. Now, Van Morrison can get quite whiny, seems to me, and but I still love his music. And I think in this case particularly, the message, the emotional quality and the message that one would get is not of a positive nature, this days like this. But in fact, he is singing about excellent days, good days, that his mother told him about, that he can cherish. I listened to the music on a day this past week when the coronavirus situation, the pandemic and everything that goes with it got to me. And I observed that it's getting to a lot of people. It's getting old, this business of social distancing, of being physically apart, and learning to do a lot of new stuff in different ways, and the uncertainty about the future. Days like this felt to me like, this is, I've about had enough of this now, and like so many others, I would long to revert to something that we refer to as normal life in the past. I still find it difficult to comprehend the statistics, the number of cases that just keeps on climbing worldwide, but especially in our beloved country, and especially the fatalities that also continue to climb. In Essex County, every morning when I check the weather, I look at the COVID tab and I see the cases. I think this morning it was 350 something. Sometimes I feel like that quote that is attributed to Chairman Mao, that one death is a tragedy, but a million becomes a statistic. Somewhat removed from this, we see it on the TV with all the presentations there, constantly bombarded by the mostly bad news. And it sometimes can feel a bit remote. However, I was reminded of the reality of the impact of this pandemic on everyday life. I was reminded of it especially when Krista and I visited the food pantry sometime this week. And I couldn't believe how the shelves have been, or the supplies, the stock have been diminished there. It was overflowing a short while ago, and now you can see there must be a lot of people needing assistance. But probably the most pertinent way and poignant way that it's brought home to me is when funeral directors ask me to do a COVID burial. And it feels like some surreal scene from a end of the world movie or something to that effect, where we gather around an open grave and everybody keeps their distance and we peer from behind masks. And there is nothing but words behind a mask that through which we try to bring comfort and to bring some assurance, some hope to people. In all of this, I've tried, as I try to do when I'm confronted with something that I do not understand or that I haven't done before, especially in societal context, to try and do some reading and gather wisdom or a bit of insight to the extent that it's possible from people who have made it their business to do the research on such matters. And about the pandemic, I read an interesting bit in one commentary on Professor Sandro Galea. He's the dean of the Boston University School of Public Health, and who did a lot of research and writing on pandemics and epidemics. And he's identified 5 stages that society goes through with pandemics. The first is self-preservation, where the dominant emotions that people respond with is fear and anxiety. Then we enter, he says, into the phase of group preservation, where changes in social behavior begin. The third phase after group preservation is blame setting, when the psychological consequences fall into place as we realize we have to change our normal activities. The fourth phase, he says, is justice seeking. We want to see what and who caused the disaster. And then the fifth stage is re-normalizing. It basically means we have adapted to the crisis and its consequences. In which stage we find ourselves, I don't know. I think it's like most of these stages that have to do with human behavior, that it's a mix, and also depending on place and time, there will be a mix with all these variables that we're subjected to. Looking towards the future has become difficult for us. We can only do so haltingly and incrementally. We almost hesitate to do it. I have to keep on reminding myself that the title of the song, Days Like This, is actually meant in a positive way. And it is true, there will be days that will be good, wonderful, excellent, beautiful days. Again, and I'm not only referring to the sunshine in this dreary spring that we're experiencing. I'm referring to life personally and collectively. There will be days like this that will be good days. It's difficult because we haven't been prepared for this. Not as individuals, not as a church, not as a nation, and not as a species. You have to go back more than 100 years and probably look at the Spanish flu as a pandemic to get a bit of understanding of what we are living through and will have to live through. It is a time when we are almost asked to, if I may use the image of Professor John Searle, a philosophy teacher that said when he spoke about how to engage the postmodern age and how to understand it, he said, You're thrown in your ship, your boat, out into a stormy sea, into a hurricane. And you have to rebuild your ship while at sea in the storm, plank by plank. I think we are, as individuals and as community, as church community, and as a nation, and as I say, as a species as well, in that situation. We have to rebuild our ship plank by plank while at sea in a storm. We have no manual of how to do this. We haven't been taught how to do it. And in most cases, there is no supervisor, or there are a lot of supervisors shouting different directions to us, the people rebuilding the ship. But I don't think we're doing too badly with this rebuilding. I can testify to that from what I experience and what I observe in just our church community, not to mention the wider community and our nation and globally in human society. Days like this, the good days and good items or markers in days come to mind for me and brightens and light up my day when I observe. Now, for instance, the parish care team is stepping up in these days, making those calls that I don't get time to make anymore, displaying compassion, working hard, as if they have been trained and displaying an excellent ability and a natural ability to do this caring. I observe it in the dedication of your leadership, the church leaders, who still find the time among everything else that's going on in their life to run a board or a committee and to continue with the activities. I see it in the attendance of the Zoom meetings of boards and committees. And I see it in the people still continuing with the mission of the church in so many ways. The meals that are prepared and delivered to LifeBridge. The people working in the food pantry, doing our contribution as a church there. I see it in the way that, in general, people care for one another. I see it in the way that the community garden is awakening, where people are stepping up and say it is time to start weeding, it is time to get the compost, so that this year again we can provide food that will be more in demand and there will be a greater need for than in previous years. There will be days like this. We will emerge from this stronger, leaner, more focused, wiser, I hope. And I really hope, as transformed people and changed in very profound ways, changed in ways that we did not think possible, and change in ways where we will be able to focus and determine what is really important, what really is our purpose, what really is our calling as followers of Jesus of Nazareth, as people of God, covenanted in community. And perhaps for us, weary Corona people, the words of Agur, son of Yaqub, is apt. Coming from the book of Proverbs, a book of wisdom literature from the Old Testament, which in this collection of sayings, this Agur is a bit different from the rest of the book of Proverbs, which shares most often the conventional wisdom, saying this is what you should do if you want to have a good life. Agur is a bit different, probably also in the very direct and also almost uncensored way that he speaks. He says, I don't understand the world. I know nothing. He says, I'm too dumb to be a human being. And then he begs for understanding. And in his asking for understanding, he has a prayer. The first is, allow me to walk in truth, that there will be no lies and lying in my life. And he asked for simplicity, to live a life while being content. Not to have too much, so that in material well-being in the extreme, that he finds a false sense of security, and also not to be deprived to the extent that he is forced to commit a crime to stay alive. In the beginning, in the unison prayer, we said the prayer of Reinhold Niebuhr together. There are many versions of this prayer floating around. I prefer this version that we said together, where he says, grant me the serenity to accept the things that I cannot change, and then importantly, the courage to change what should be changed, and then the wisdom to know the difference. There is both the acceptance, but also the acceptance of the calling to commit yourself to change what should be changed. There is also the mention of living in the moment, one moment at a time, and living one day at a time, which I think is appropriate for us to pray for our circumstances as well. This prayer of Niebuhr, born in a time of crisis, perhaps even a bigger crisis, much bigger than we are facing now, I think is something that we can include in our thinking to guide our living for every day. Yes, this pandemic has laid bare many things that are not right in our society, in the world. There are, if you care to look for it, many instances where action and behavior is motivated by greed, where fear-mongering is rife, and where selfish behavior still dictates, where the vulnerable are victimized. There is that. But there is also the many beautiful things. There is also the moments in every day that Van Morrison speaks about, days like this. There is for us as a church community of faith also, days like this, when we heed the words that Paul wrote in his epistle to the church in Rome. Everyone with his or her gift contributing to make life every day a day like this. There will be days like this at some point in the future, where we will emerge as new people, changed, whether we want it or not. Let us make the right decisions. Let us be guided by our sacred text and the great commandments specifically. Let us journey together, so that as we find our way, as we rebuild our ship in this stormy sea, that we can look each other in the eye, even if it is from behind the mask, or even if it is through the screen of a Zoom meeting, that we can testify. Thank God for this time where we can find ourselves and find new purpose and find and rediscover the value of relationship, the value of being of service to one another. Let us journey in a time like this, making every day a day like this. May God grant us the wisdom for that.